and Lycian or Lycian necropolises, it depends, there are so many different variants of pronouncing this. As is the case for many ancient civilizations, are fundamental sources of information. Carved from local stone, these sites provided important data for better understanding their architectural form, burial customs of the times, and belief in the afterlife. They are significant in one more way, because neither civilization left an extensive written legacy. Tombs represent primary documentation of the daily lives of the people. This claim is based on the assumption that necropolises represented houses of the living at a time that do not exist today or have changed dramatically over time. The necropolises enclose not only the architectural forms, but the furnishing, wall painting, and sculptural works that personalize each buried individual. The intention of this paper is twofold: to demonstrate similarities between the selected Etruscan house tomb type tombs in Norchia and Sovana in Italy, and the Lycian cities of Myra and Limyra in present-day Turkey during the Hellenistic time period. And second, to determine if either necropolises were laid out according to an urban plan, or individual tombs were constructed on randomly selected blocks. To give you an idea of geography, and I hope so you can see, unfortunately the map of Etruria is not quite easy to recognize, but Norchia and Sovana are a little bit 100 kilometers north of Naples. They are actually marked, but I don't have any laser to point out, but it's all good. And, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Norchia. Oh, I can see from here and Sovana instead. So, if I can see from here. There are three fundamental forms, and the map of Lycia can show you cities of Myra and Limyra in southern portion of Anatolia. There are three fundamental forms of rock tomb in Etruria. There are cube tombs, gable tubes, and tubuli. The first and the second reproduce two forms of the Etruscan houses. The tumuli are chronologically the earlier forms, modeled upon Villanova Iron Age tombs. Among the best preserved Lycian tombs are house type and temple type facades. In both cultures, only the aristocracy and the upper middle class families could afford this type of high quality resting place. As usual, art history is about rich and wealthy, unfortunately. In few times, even in resting places and 70s. In cube tombs, the facade typically consists of two parts, a plain lower front, and the upper decorated portion. In many cases, there is a plinth at the bottom of the front and a small three-walled chamber cut into the rock. The gable roof house tombs are common in Sovana, but are seen less frequently in the southern cemeteries. Most of them have false doors and small porticos in front. The pedimented tomb is a variation of the gable tomb. It often has multi-story, column facade, and pediments ornamented with standard mythological symbols and often covered with painted stucco. The interiors of the tombs were reached directly through a door in the facade as in the house, real door, or by means of drums or long passages. In the case of drums, a false door marked by an outline in relief was carved into the facade. There are two possible explanations for the appearance of false door. One is that owners' desire wanted to really deter grave robbers. A more practical explanation suggests that it would be rather difficult to move a funeral procession through real doors, so a deep drums was used instead. In many cases, Facades are textured as a false timber modeled upon Lycian houses. Most of the tombs were discovered open and no traces of original doors were found. It has been suggested that the tomb entrances were closed with blocks, slabs, or stone, or wooden boards. The multi-chamber interiors are reminiscent of banquet scene with stone benches and couches lined with ceiling covered to imitate beams, reeds, or roof walls. Most of the tombs were looted completely and have suffered further damage and deterioration from being used as stables or shelters by local shepherds and stray animals, like this litter of 9 white puppies in Myra, and tourists being very happy to feed them. Inscriptions in rock cemeteries of Etruria are rare, and they were common in chamber tombs from the second half of the 6th century BCE. Inscriptions referring to names of the individual occupants or families were carved into the architrave above the entrance. In Lycian example, the situation is different. There are about 150 funeral inscriptions in local language, ranging in date from 430 to 330 BCE, and over 1,000 inscriptions in the Greek language that appear in the 3rd century BCE. In most cases, the following elements can be determined. The name of the tomb owner, names of the individuals allowed to be buried in the tomb, a list of potential violators of the tomb, the punitive agent who would seek compensation from the violators, and various other provisions of uncertain meaning. As a general rule, the eligible occupants were confined to the owner's immediate family, the spouse and children. After the 3rd century BCE, tomb owners were granting burials for a wide range of family connections, friends, and independents in addition to their spouse, children, and other lineal descendants. Commonly included were parents, in-laws, foster children, freedmen, and even slaves. Because of limited space inside the tombs, disturbance of removal of earlier burials was a common practice. It is obvious that in both Etruscan and Lycian cultures, communal burial was a long-standing tradition. The very establishment of necropolises, their widespread distribution, and the quality of individual tombs emphasized the importance of their location and layout. In addition, topography played an important part in the founding of urban centers and were directly relevant to the size of necropolises. Proximity to waterways, the nature of the soil, accessibility, and road communication are only a few of the elements that determine development of cities of the living and the dead. There is no doubt that general planning principle govern the organization and size of rock-cut tombs, and they are setting in a small, compact areas near the city walls or along important roads. The relationship between habitation area is easy to see when an isolated acropolis is surrounded on all sides by cliffs with obvious remains of rock-cut facades and chambers. Similarly, in the Lycian cities of Myra, and Limyra, the rock-cut facades are scattered around centers of the ancient urban areas overlooking carefully positioned theaters. The fringes of dependent necropolises were usually within 1 kilometer of the city. The appearance of the small, isolated necropolises 8 or 10 kilometers distance most likely signal the existence of some rural centers, for example, near Cusic, Perugia, or Casteldasso, or dependence on major cities. While necropolises clearly involve radical alternation of the landscape to provide suitable opportunity for the construction of a number of tomb facades. Porches, steps, and pathways were part of the special plan. In many cases, the arrangement of individual tombs in cemeteries varied and was governed by natural resources. At Sovana, where tufa is only found at the high part of the hill and in a thin stratum, the tombs are almost all situated on the same level. Occasionally, a system of terraces was adapted to accommodate numerous tombs. Where the cliff facade was very steep, the rows of tombs were superimposed one above the other in successive stories, as in Etruscan Norchia and Lycian Myra and Limyra. Most of the tombs of this type are small dimensions, without staircases, and with prominent upper moldings. Scarcity of natural material limited the design of individual tombs and altered their orientation. Access to the various parts of the facade for visits and funeral rituals became the major consideration. It was vital that the access to the chamber be always positioned conveniently because of the frequency of visits and the burden of carrying corpses. Regarding orientation, it seemed that only northern exposure was avoided at all times. The other three directions were accepted. Despite the fact that most tombs were found empty, it is possible to hypothetically reconstruct funeral rites shared by both Etruscans and Lycians. The very fact that tombs were built as replica of the houses of the living, and the fact that inscriptions refer to individual members or relatives of the family to be buried with the owner, suggests belief in an afterlife and desire to perpetuate the same social environment. The funeral procession was performed carefully and consisted of bringing the body from the city to the prepared tomb, accompanied by relatives, sometimes musicians, and a religious authority conducted the ceremony. The body was then laid out on the couch. In some cases, the place was specifically determined in advance by the owner himself, and the sacrificial offerings were made in honor of the deceased. Failure to carry out the sacrifice was regarded as a high offense and was punishable by law. Afterwards, the entrance of the tomb was sealed, and the procession returned to the city. Throughout the year, similar offerings were performed by family members. For each successive burial, the ritual was repeated. It has already been mentioned that in the normal process of developing rock necropolises, the existence of a road or demand of topography determined the overall plan. In addition, the unplanned growth of population resulted in what may be determined organized chaos under quotation, as the lack of space in already existing and planned cemeteries led to departure from many other established rules. These were most noticeable in the carelessly cut out tombs with asymmetrical chambers, false doors slightly inclined, and roughly executed with no decoration of the pediment. These tombs also revealed the poor workmanship and the possible poverty of the owner. On the other hand, in the Etruscan cemetery of Crocifisso del Tuffo in Orient, urban planning reached its highest level of craftsmanship. The single, relatively modest chamber tombs are arranged in rectangular blocks accessible by a system of straight streets. The distance between units became regular, a drainage system was in place, and even small squares were designed around the crossroads. In addition, inscriptions carrying the names of the occupants were carved in the architrave above the entrance. Of all necropolises, this one most closely resembles the city of the living. This tendency, beginning in the 6th century BC in Etruria, continues to be practiced in other cemeteries that were planned ahead of time, such as the case in Hellenistic. One more issue that restricted Etruscans erected their tombs was relative to the exact and proper division of the sky and the land into units of ceremonial or commercial values. It seems that the acquisition of tomb sites was casual in rock-cut facade necropolises as they occupied marginal land as a type of funeral commons under quotation. However, even in these cases, regulations that forbade the infringement of another facade or the destruction of the major access route were in place. It is therefore logically expected that on completion of construction, the tomb would become private property. All these issues were regulated by members of the priesthood as spiritual advisors to necropolis administrators. Describe the Romans as a nation more than any other dedicated to religion. Etruscans would mostly probably have been in favor of careful planning their final resting place. If the terrain was difficult, they were forced to opt for the organized chaos, which seemed to be the case in most rock-cut cemeteries at the disappearing of the cliff. According to Lycian practices, it seemed that the organized chaos was more prevalent as well. However, one element differs between these two cultures. Lycians are very concerned with specific place allocations within the chamber, and honor were explicit in their demands. According to inscriptions, Munti was an institution or council closely connected with the supervision of the various tombs and was authorized to punish persons guilty of tomb violators. The Munti consisted of family members from different households who were paid for their services. A question commonly arises about historical and therefore cultural connection between the Etruscan and Lycians based on their necropolises and burial practices. Both civilizations demonstrated belief in an afterlife by creating sepulchres consisting of tombs that reproduced their houses with predominantly gabled roofs. The tombs were cut out of the hills and cliffs in successive stories, one above the other. The units are decorated with the equivalent emphasis on the upper moldings. The false doors, or those with two doors, the double story, the vestibule for the worship of the dead, and the interiors are very similar. Furthermore, details are very comparable. The facade of Limyra has, at the first part of the upper decoration, a molding in volume, parallel to the Etruscan leaf moldings. Figure decoration often consists of images and deities in the forms of serpents and fishes. Palmate motifs and details are commonly, this is an organized house in Myra that I mentioned, and then figure decoration also consists in the forms of serpents and fishes. Palmate motifs and dentils are common in both cultures, and this is the Lycian example of the palmate motif and Etruscan one. Of course, there is a different material, Etruscan tufa, and in the case of Etruscan molding, it's made of terracotta, one of the favorite medium of Etruscan. In many cases, paint was applied on stucco decorative layers that were applied either to limestone or either to tufa. So paint was something that originally existed on the facade, and it can be seen in some of the cases in Myra as well as in Etruscan examples. It is important to know that some features are also shared with Phrygian tombs, but not with Lydia, which is often considered one of the possible fatherlands of the Etruscans. According to Herodotus in his histories, due to famine, the Lydian king Attis ordered his son Pausanias to sail away with a half the population in order to, quote, to seek for means of living and a land to dwell in. Oh, pardon me. Okay. After passing many nations, they reached the land of the Oricians, which is today's present-day Umbria, and they decided to stay there. They became known as Pausanians, taking the name of their leaders. Later, the Romans called Etruria Pausania, according to Herodotus. Gino Rossi suggested that in the very distant past, Lydia once encompassed all of the Southwest Asia Minor. If we accept this, my conclusion is very easy. The common bond between Etruscan and Lydians, which then laid the boundaries of ancient Lycia, it's obvious. They originated from the same stock of people, and therefore, despite the appropriation of local culture and customs, the basic funeral practices were closely related, if not identical, as demonstrated in the design of selected Hellenistic necropolises. But of course, it's easy way out. I seriously doubt that, and there are historians here that will consider that actually Lydia really occupied the entire territory of Southwest Anatolia. But in the case of that, it is remarkable to accept this notion as absolute belief that the Etruscan originated from Asia Minor versus one of the present-day acceptance that they are indigenous to Thank you very much.